Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are looking at A-level psychology, the optional topic of aggression. This is the final optional topic that I'm going to be covering. Everything else, every other optional topic is already on my channel for you to look at. If you found this video useful, please subscribe, check out all my other videos. I also have sociology and chemistry videos. And comment below any questions you have, and either myself or your fellow students will get to it, whoever gets there first. But let's just dive straight in. So firstly, looking at the biological mechanisms of aggression. So there's kind of three parts to this. You've got neuromechanisms, hormones, and genetics. Starting with neuromechanisms, so the limbic system is an area of the brain that plays a role in emotional processing and the main area associated with aggression. The amygdala, please, I fully apologise for the way I may pronounce some of these things. This is an area of the limbic system and associated with aggression. So Gospic et al. In 2011 used fMRI scans to measure brain activity during a game designed to promote aggression. Obviously, there is scientific evidence from Gospic, but it's also very deterministic, this kind of idea of this one area of the brain causing aggression. Then you have serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter associated with aggression. Low levels suggesting higher levels of aggression, from Cherrick and Lane in 1999, who found giving a drug that increases serotonin activity reduces aggressive behaviour. Again, scientific evidence, but there's always the question of correlation versus causation. Then looking at hormones, so testosterone is the main hormone related to aggression, which is the primary sex hormone in males. Dabbs et al. In 1995 found violent crime offenders had higher testosterone levels and more likely to be involved in fights. Of course, there is this supporting evidence, but again, correlation versus causation. Then you have genetics. So genetics play a big part in neural mechanisms and hormone levels. So Kokaro et al. In 1997 analysed 182 identical twin pairs and 118 non-identical twin pairs. So this is essentially where the identical twin pairs have 100% same genes and non-identical have 50%. Concordance rate for physical violence was 50% among identical twins and 19% among non-identical, which suggests that genetic component. The MAOA gene is associated with aggression, responsible for producing monoamine oxidase A, which is an enzyme that produces neurotransmitters such as serotonin, and the low activity from this gene, MAOAL, results in lower levels of MAOA and associated with aggression, which is seen from Brunner et al. In 1993. Of course, again, there is a supporting evidence, but there are exceptions to this as well. Obviously, not everybody fits this trend. As you can see, the concordance rates aren't 100%, so there's nothing saying that genetics is the main cause for aggression and aggressive behaviour. Then we have ethological explanations of aggression. So ethology is the study of natural animal behaviours, and in this case provides insight into aggression in humans and informs evolutionary explanations. Starting with innate releasing mechanisms, you've got Lorenz in 1966, who argued that aggressive behaviour is innate to help species survive and pass on their genes. Patterns of aggressive behaviour within a species are often ritualistic, allowing members of a species to compete and establish dominance without actually harming each other. Typical patterns of aggressive behaviour in animals goes through aggression continuously building up over time, an environmental stimulus triggering the innate releasing mechanism, which is a biologically hardwired mechanism triggered by environment. And then this goes forward into the innate releasing mechanism, releasing a fixed action pattern of behaviour, aggression is released, and the cycle repeats. And looking a little bit further at these fixed action patterns, so these are universal across the species, and once initiated, the animal will keep going until the behaviour is complete. Tinbergen in 1952 demonstrates how fixed action patterns in sticklebacks are universal. When Tinbergen presented male sticklebacks with models of fish with red bellies, even when not realistic looking, they responded with the same fixed action pattern of fighting behaviour. Of course, in both cases, there is research support for this, but especially with animal studies, there's always the question of, how well does it actually transfer over to humans? How realistic is that? So that kind of impacts the reliability of this. Then looking at the evolutionary explanations. So over many years, random mutations in genes that are advantageous for survival or reproduction become more widespread among the species. Aggression can help humans survive as they can gain access to resources such as food, resources, as well as defense for resources and protecting against injury and death. If a human is more likely to survive, then they are more likely to live long enough to reproduce and pass on their genes. It can also help humans reproduce as competition for mates, known as anisogamy. It means women must be selective over who they have children with, and men compete with other men for status and resources, so that women will choose them as a mate. Pinker in 1997 suggests this is why aggression evolved in men, obviously to compete for women. It also deters infidelity, as anisogamy also means women can be certain of their paternity but men can't. So aggression is a way to prevent women cheating on them. Obviously that's a very horrible, old-fashioned kind of way to think about it. But obviously I guess fair enough. But Wilson and Daly in 1996 identified two main strategies, which is direct guarding, such as watching the female's behaviour, and negative inducements, such as actually threatening the woman. Of course, there is research support, as you can see here, but this kind of theory goes against determinism and free will. Then we have social psychological explanations. So starting with frustration aggression hypothesis. So Dollard et al. In 1939 states that aggression is a response to frustration. Frustration is defined as being prevented from achieving a goal, such as trying to beat someone at a sport, but they keep beating you. This causes frustration, which can then lead to feeling of aggression. Likelihood of aggressive behaviour is proportional to the level of frustration, so essentially, the more frustrated you get, the more likely you are to turn to aggressive behaviour. Possible consequences increase or decrease the likelihood of this behaviour in response to frustration, such as something like punishment, but also its usefulness towards actually reaching your goals. So, in the example I spoke of before, how will, being aggressive towards your opponent in a race help you win the race? No, probably not. You need to turn that frustration into something useful rather than, beating someone up. Of course, there's the evidence from Buss in 1963, but then there are, of course, other factors at play, like we've discussed already. Then we have social learning theory. So Bandura in 1961, you'll probably already know about this, the Bobo the doll experiment. So the children who watched a role model acting aggressively towards Bobo doll were more likely to act aggressively towards it themselves. Then you have mediating processes, so cognitive factors between observation and imitation determine whether someone's decided to imitate or not. If someone is rewarded, then more likely to imitate this behaviour, but if punished, then less likely. Other mediating processes are attention, retention, and reproduction, and of course vicarious reinforcement. So this is where, in the case of I just spoke about, if you see someone else getting rewarded for that behaviour, that then reinforces you wanting to do it. Of course, there is a practical application, so in terms of actually raising children and reducing their aggressive behaviour, if there's less aggressive behaviour, for example, in the household, then they are less likely to imitate and present aggressive behaviour in other scenarios. But of course, again, other factors at play. Then you have de-individuation. So this is when a person loses a sense of personal identity and personal responsibility along with anonymity, making a person more likely to act aggressively. Festinger et al. In 1952 describes a phenomenon where people in crowds lose their sense of personal identity and instead identify with the morals and beliefs of a group. And the feeling of the anonymity in the crowd, means people are more likely to act violently and aggressively. So a key example of this is football riots. Obviously, people are in a massive crowd, they're a massive community supporting one team, and especially in the case of when their favourite team loses, and they don't maybe they don't think it's fair, or for some of the other reason. Obviously, there's been lots of football riots in the past. Having that sense of anonymity in that crowd can make it more likely. Then you have Dodd in 1985, who got 203 students to anonymously describe what they would do if no one could identify or hold them responsible, and 36% involved some form of antisocial behaviour, and most obvious answer being to rob a bank. Of course, you can see here there is research support for this, and also there is a sense of real life application, because obviously this can help you to understand and potentially tackle, things like cyberbullying or how to control big crowds. But as always, there are other factors at play. Then we have institutional aggression. So starting with dispositional explanation. So aggression is higher in prisons because people who get sent to prison are naturally more aggressive. That's the argument for this one. So the importation model from Irwin and Cressy in 1962 suggests that inmates import the social norms and behaviour of their criminal and aggressive lives outside of prison, which make up three distinct subcultures within prisons. You've got thief subculture, so repeat offenders who are in and out of prison regularly, follow a criminal code of honour that emphasises not snitching on other criminals, reliability, trustworthiness, and loyalty. Then you have convict subculture, so offenders who are serving long sentences aim to achieve status within the prison hierarchy and access to resources, and this is the most aggressive type of subculture. Then you've got legitimate subculture, so first-time offenders and those not from criminal cultures and follow legitimate prison rules, so any rules kind of set by the guards. People from these subcultures have a disposition towards these behaviours and act this way even when not in prison. There's evidence from Delisi et al. In 2005 suggesting that a relationship between gang membership and prison violence, so essentially if you're in a gang, you're more likely to be violent within prison. But of course there are other factors at play, such as the social factors or explanations we just discussed, or also the situational explanations which we're now about to go into. So something about the environment of prisons makes people behave more aggressively. So this is the argument of situational. They're just in that situation and are behaving as they would in that situation, but not outside. So the deprivation model from Sykes in 1958 suggests that inmates being deprived of 5 things causes aggression. And these 5 things are known as the pains of imprisonment. So liberty, losing freedom reinforces feelings of being rejected by society. Goods and services, so not having access to anything you want leads to anger and frustration. Heterosexual relationships, so obviously deprived of sex and emotional intimacy. Obviously this one does not apply to everyone. But then also if you are homosexual, it's maybe more difficult for you to have these kind of relationships within prison anyway. Then you have autonomy, so a lack of control is very frustrating. Then security, so prisons are violent environments and so do not feel safe and on edge. Then someone is more likely to, you're going to feel more on it. Because you're feeling more on edge, you're going to behave more aggressively towards others in order to protect yourself. There is evidence from Megarji in 1977, so the relationship between disruptive behaviour and crowding in prisons. But then, of course, other factors. That isn't meant to say situational, that's meant to say dispositional. My apologies. But yeah, obviously there's other explanations as to why someone's behaving that way in prison. Then finally, we have media influences on aggression. So starting off with desensitization. So after repeat exposure, a person can become desensitized to violence and aggression, such as video games, movies, and online videos. You see so many online videos that go viral showing horrific things. In theory, desensitization increases aggression as a normal emotional reaction, such as anxiety and stress, that would normally prevent this behaviour isn't as strong. Then you have disinhibitions. So inhibitions restrain us from behaving aggressively or inappropriately in real life. But in a video game, a person is disinhibited, so they're free to act without consequence in the same way you would in real life. Disinhibition in games can transfer to real life as a behaviour seems more acceptable and so are more likely to behave aggressively. Then with cognitive priming, so this is the idea that aggressive behaviours seen in the media are remembered and therefore prime a person to behave similarly when in similar situations. Exposure to violence and aggression in games and the media can prime people to behave more aggressively. Apologies for my laptop going off. In terms of support, so evidence for video games influencing aggressive behaviour, so Anderson et al. In 2010 completed a meta-analysis of 136 studies across multiple cultures and found that exposure to violent video games is correlated with increases in aggressive behaviour and aggressive thoughts. But of course, like always, there are other factors at play. We've seen that genetics, evolution, there's social theories behind it beyond the media that can influence whether a person is likely to show signs of aggression. But that is everything for today. I hope you guys really found this video useful. Please subscribe, like the video, comment below any questions you have, and I shall maybe see you in another video, or yeah, good luck with your exams.